Hey, I'm Hunter from SkillThrive, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to add a progress bar at the top of your Next.js applications to show to your users that they're changing routes. Now, in a React application, if you created it with like Create React App, your app will change pages really quickly, but then the data will load in, so you have some type of loading state. With Next.js, you might want to use something like this because with a server-side rendered page, you might click a page and then it takes a second for it to change because it first makes a call to the server to get that data, and then that data is going to be presented once that page is loaded. So it feels a little weird for a user if they click something and nothing happens. So this progress bar helps signal to your user that, hey, we see your request, we're processing it, and it just makes things feel a little more snappier. So let's go ahead and just look at the final project here that we're going to be creating. And you can see here, the dashboard is a static page. So you see that it loads pretty quick, but there still was that route change. So you saw the progress bar happen really quickly. Now the team page should take a little bit longer because it's making a call to an API in order to get some users in order to display them on the team page. So if we click here, keep an eye up on the top here for the progress bar. You can see that how it loads in. So it says, hey, we're processing this request, and then once it loads in, it finishes that animation. Now Next.js actually has a official example in their example GitHub repo called, I think, with loading. I'll add that in the description if you're interested. And it's very similar to what I'm doing here, but instead of just using the in progress npm package in order to handle that that animation, I'm using a wrapper around that in progress called in progress React. And this gives you the functionality of in progress, but makes it really easy to style and add your own React components in order to get that design that you want. So let's go ahead and go into the project here that I have created. And once you get to GitHub for this project, you'll see that there's a branch called Start here, and that's the starting point that we have right now. So let's go ahead and just show you what this looks like. So this is essentially looks the same, but it doesn't have that progress bar. So we go to Dashboard, and they go to Team. So you see how there's just like a slight second there? That's the solution that we want this progress bar to fix. And I also want to mention that this design, these components, are coming from Tailwind UI. Now I actually have the full Tailwind UI, but they have some of these example or previewed components here where you can go in and copy the code in order to get these functionalities and try this out. Now, I'm a big fan of Tailwind UI. I think it's definitely worth it if you're interested or on the edge of buying, but just wanted to mention that in case you wanted to use this in a project. I'm no way paid or affiliated with them, just thought it was something I needed to mention. Okay, so now that we have that, let's jump back into code. I'm going to kill my server here, clear out our console, and there's a couple things that I need to install. One is going to be that React in progress package. So I'm going to do npm install. I'm just going to copy this here from the dependencies. And I also want to install a package for managing state. It's a little bit, it's not as heavy as something as Redux, but it's called useStand. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but that's how you spell that there. And then just click enter or return in order to install those packages. So now that that's installed, let's go ahead and create our store with that state component library that we're using. So let's create a new folder here, call this store. And inside there, we'll create a new file called useProgressStore.js, and go ahead and create a new file called index.js. And in this, we'll say export everything from useProgressStore. And this makes it easy when we want to use certain files in our project. We just refer to this store instead of referring to each one individually. So let's go into our useProgressStore here and create our state. So we'll say import create from useStand, and we'll export the const use progress store. This is going to use that create function, and on this create function we have another function we get access to called set, which we use to set the state. Then we just create this object with our state values and the functions that are used to change them. The first one is going to be called a value called isAnimating, which by default will be set to false. And then we have the function called set is animating. And that is going to take in an argument called isAnimating. Now it could be called anything. You could just call this state if you want. But the reason I'm calling it isAnimating is because whatever comes in here, we're just going to set it to that isAnimating value. So we say set, and we're going to set isAnimating, and we can just leave it like this because the name of what we're passing in is the same as the value that we want to change. But essentially, we're just saying isAnimating like this. And if we change this to something like value, we would change this to value as well. But just to keep it a little simpler, we'll just set it like that. And there we go. Now we have everything set up for our state. Now let's go ahead and create the components for our progress bar. So I'm going to come into components here, create a new folder called progress. Then I'm going to create a couple files here. First one, we're going to create one called bar.js, create one called container.js, then one called progress. And last, I'm going to create an index where I export everything that I want. And now I'm actually only going to be exporting the progress bar from this file because that's the only one we're going to have access to. So export everything from progress. Go ahead and close that. We're done there. And another thing we want to do, and the next thing we want to do is move into our bar component. And let's go ahead and open this up. Now, I did mention that I'm using Tailwind UI in order to style this application, which means that I'm using Tailwind. Now, Next.js has a really easy way to set up Tailwind in your project, which I'll link below. But if you looked at the Start Here directory or the branch in the GitHub, you should already have everything set up for you to get started. Now, I kind of already talked about this, but the reason I picked this React in progress component instead of just using the original in progress package is because it's easier to style it. If you're just using the in progress, what you would do is you would import a CSS file and then add your styles or classes there. But this makes it really easy to get the functionality of in progress, but it doesn't actually render anything. Creating the components is up to you. So if you're using something like styled components, or in this case, Tailwind, it's really easy to add those styles yourself. So let's go ahead and create this component. And this component is going to be passed in a couple of props. First one is going to be called animation duration. The next one is going to be called progress. And this is going to go ahead and return a div. And this div is just going to be, there's not going to be any children in this div, but we are going to add a class name here. Now this class name is where we pass in the Tailwind classes. So let's go ahead and add a background color. So background-indigo 600. The height is going to be 1, which is 4 pixels, or excuse me, 0.25 rem. The width is going to be full, so we want it to take the full screen. It's going to have a left of 0, a top of 0, and it's also going to have a position of fixed, and we're going to add a z index of 50. All right, so now that we have that class defined, there are some other styles that we want to add to this, but these styles are going to be dynamic. They're going to be changing based off of what the animation duration and progress values are. And the way that we handle dynamic styling when we're using something like Tailwind is to just pass in some styles in line like this. So we could say margin left, and margin left is going to be equal to this string value. So we'll say -1 plus the progress multiplied by 100%. So, okay. Then we have another value here that we're going to write for transition. And that's going to be margin left, because that's the value that we are targeting. And the animation duration. So animation duration. That's going to be milliseconds, and the animation style is going to be linear. So we save that. Looks like everything looks correct. And now let's go ahead now and move on to our container. So let's open up our container folder. There, we're going to export our container here. And this one is going to take in animation duration as well. Children. And the next prop is going to be called is finished. Again, this is going to be a div. Here we're going to have our children passed in here, and then we're going to add our class name. So class name equals, this is going to have pointer events none, and then we're going to write those inline styles. So style, we're going to say opacity, and this is going to be a ternary operator that's going to look at is finished. So if it is finished, we're going to set opacity to 0, and if it is not, we want to set the opacity to 1. And that should be a comma. And the next thing we want to do is transition. So again, we want to add some animation properties to this opacity, which is going to look at the animation duration. And it's going to set it to milliseconds and have it as linear. I spelled that incorrectly. There we go. Make sure I spelled it right here as well. Okay. So that's everything for the container. Now let's go ahead and actually work on the in progress component. So on this one, we actually want to import use in progress from this package here that we installed. We also want to import our components. So we want to import bar. We also want to import container. All right, now we can go ahead and create our component. This one is going to take in that state value called is animating, which comes from that state that we just set up. And then let's go ahead and use that use in progress React hook to get access to those values that we need to pass to our other components. One is animation duration, is finished, and progress. And that equals the use in progress hook. And this use in progress hook takes in one argument in this case, which is going to be that is animating value. So just pass it in here. Okay, so now that we have that, we can go ahead and write our return here for our component. First, we have to add our container. And remember that this container takes in 2 arguments. It's going to take in animation duration and is finished. I'm just going to pass those here. And last, we want our bar component. So that's going to be our bar. And this one takes in 2 as well, but it's going to take in the animation duration and the progress, which again we get from this in progress React hook. All right, so now that we have that, the next thing we want to do is we actually want to use this in our application. And where we actually do that is in the app. So let's go into our pages, into our app, and then we're going to add this here in our app so it's accessed on every page. Now there's a couple things here that we need to import. First one is going to be use effect. This is coming from React. And we also need to import use router, which is coming from Next router. All right, so now that we have those, we need to just go ahead and import the components that we need. So we're going to import progress from components. And let's make sure we actually exported that here. So we need to make sure we export this from this index. So export everything from progress. And then we need to go ahead and import that state that we created. So useProgressStore, and that's coming from our store file. All right, so now we have that. Let's go ahead and get access to those values in our store. And the way we do that is we first say whatever the value is. So this is going to be set is animating equal to useProgressStore, passing in the state, and then we can read off that state the value that we want. So in this case, state.set is animating. We want to do something very similar for the other value, which is animating. So we'll call this is animating. passing in the state and then getting access to that value on state.isAnimating. Yep. Next, we want to define our router using that useRouter hook. So router equals useRouter. So we call that hook, and now we have access to that and the events on it, which we're going to be using in our useEffect. So we'll write our useEffect hook, which watches for changes in certain components or in certain items here, which we can define in this dependency array. And what we're looking for in this dependency array is any changes to our router. So now that we have this, we can go ahead and define everything we want to do in this useEffect hook. So we first want to define two methods here, one called handleStart and one called handleStop. So handleStart, all this is going to do is set isAnimating to true, and handleStop is this going to set isAnimating to false. Now this entire example is coming directly from that with loading example that Next.js already has, but because we're using store, it's a little bit different. But this example, like I said, if you need a reference to how they do this in Progress, make sure you check that out in the description below. So now that we have access to the router, we can actually get access to events, which we can use in order to trigger certain things. So on router.events, on whatever event that we're looking for, so in this case, there's an event called route change start. So whenever this happens, we can call some type of function. So in this case, we call handleStart. And this documentation I'll link as well in the description below, but this is just coming from Next.js as well. Now there's a couple more functions here, which I'm just going to copy over and paste. So there's another event called route change complete. So if that's completed, we want to call handleStop. And if there's any errors, we want to call handleStop as well. So now that we define what we want to do on these events and they're listening for these events, we have to clean up and tell React to stop listening for events on our cleanup. So in order to clean up those, we just return this here and then say, instead of on, we have a value called off. So I'm just going to copy these because they're exactly the same, but in this case, it's called off. All right, so now that we have that defined, there's just one more thing we need to do, and that is to actually use the progress component here in our app. So we need to change this return, go ahead and cut this out, paste it here, and then call our progress component. And this progress component takes in one argument, which is isAnimating. And this is complaining because you need some type of wrapper around this, which you can use a fragment for. And then it's going to stop complaining. All right, so now we have everything set up. Let's make sure that everything works by starting up our server. So we'll run npm run dev. All right, so we're getting an error here. Use in progress is not a function, so it looks like I spelled something incorrectly. Let's go into our progress component. So it should be 2 S's. Save that, make sure that goes away. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So that is an issue here in our team page. Let's go into our team page. This is one I just missed here. So let's go where we use this map. The key should actually be, this should be good. We have a key here, so I'm not sure why that's complaining. Maybe it's in our nav because I think we have another map here. Scroll down. Okay, so we need to take this key from this A tag, make sure it's in our link. Okay, now we got rid of those errors. Let's go back into our example here, refresh. Let's go to our home page. So you saw that load, that looked like it was good. Dashboard, that works. and our team works as well. All right, so that's it. You saw how easy it is to add a progress bar to the top of your Next.js applications in order to signal to your users that they're changing routes and when they actually completed the route changes. If you liked this video and found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And be sure to check out our other design and development tutorials on our YouTube channel, as well as our in-depth guides on skillthrive.com. Again, I'm Hunter from SkillThrive, and I'll see you in the next one.